Hey everyone, tonight's video we're going to be taking the basic Express app that we built last night and giving it a little bit more structure, something that will actually scale as you add more and more code. And I just want to talk a little bit about why that is. I know when you did your Unit 6 project, you had pretty much all of your JavaScript in 1 or 2 files, maybe 3. That was fine for a small project, but now as you guys become full stack developers, you're going to be doing a lot. You're going to have a full front end, you're going to have a full back end, you're going to have talking to a database. You might even have WebSockets. Some of you guys go really crazy. So there's a lot more stuff that you need to cram into your application. And honestly, it's just going to be terrible if you try and do it all in one file. Okay, now the first thing we need to update here is this in-memory database array. This is obviously not good, and what I want to replace this with is a model. You guys remember models from Unit 4 with your object-oriented programming. A model is basically an entity in your database in this context. It's just going to give you all of the properties and methods that you need access to in a single encapsulated place. So that is really important because right now, our controllers know an awful lot about our database implementation. They are going in and writing the callback themselves, referencing specific properties, and that's going to cause problems if our database changes things internally or we swap from an in-memory database to an actual database, or we go from one flavor of SQL to another flavor of SQL. This is where models can really help us because the model is the layer that talks to the database and everybody else talks to the model. So you have this nice layer that splits things up. So I can change the database, I can do whatever I want, but as long as my model has a method called findUser, nobody else cares. You just pass in an ID and leave the implementation up to the model. That's why models are great. They keep our controller logic simple instead of expanding into this behemoth that knows everything about everything. We really only want our controllers to know about the business logic of routing. Like, I need to get a user. I don't need to know anything about how to get a user. I just need to know const user equals get one. Okay? So this is not going to be a tutorial on how to write a model. That is something that you guys have already learned when it was basic JavaScript and something you will learn later once we do actual SQL code. No, instead tonight, we are just going to take an existing model, which you already have access to, and we're just going to essentially plug it in. So let's make a models directory, and then inside that, let's make a user.js. Now, just like the convention is for the class to be singular, you can use the class name of the file to also be singular. And let's just import this here. Okay? We'll really quickly go through what this is, but you can read this code on your own. I don't want to dwell over it. Basically, it's just CRUD. So we can create a new user. We can list all the existing users. We can find an existing user by an ID. We can update an existing user. In this case, all it's doing is updating the name. And then we can destroy a user. And of course, all that we're really doing here when we make a new user is set the name over here and create a new ID. And now, instead of doing that truly terrible thing where we're just grabbing the length, this is a little closure up here that will automatically increment the ID as long as our server is running, which is fine because this is still just going to be in memory. But now, instead of knowing how to format and create a new ID, which we do here, this is truly database logic. This stuff gets taken out. So this is going to be our user model. And now let's actually plug it into our code. Okay, so first things first, I need some way of actually accessing this code. Now, right now, it would seem like all I'd have to do is say const user, capitalize it, user equals require models user. And then I could just, reference it down here. I could be like, all right, user.list and go. But the problem is this user here, that's a local variable. That is just in this file. It's up here. and that's why it has access to it. But as you see later on in the video, we are going to break all of this stuff out. We're going to use different files and everything like that. So I actually don't want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is put the user on the actual request object. And the way I can do that is with middleware. App.use, rec next. Let's see if it figures it out. Nope, good guess. Rec.user equals user next. And that's it. Oh, sorry. Thought I was writing Vim for a second there. And that's it. That's all we really have to do. And this would be fine, except we can go even deeper and do rec.db, or sometimes they say models, but let's just make it clear what we're doing. Rec.db equals user here. Oh, sorry. And now, in the future, if I ever had other models, I could very easily put them in like this and yeah, there we go. We're just cooking now. And then it would scale really easily, and all I would have to do is just destructure it out. So that's usually why you will find it, you know, rec dot something, is we want to keep it all organized and together. I know it seems silly now because we only have one user, but remember, the whole idea here is that we are giving you a structure that can scale. So it might seem silly when there's only one, but it won't seem silly when you have 7. So I have now my DB and my user. So now don't take my word for it. Let's see that this actually works. So let's go back, let's go back to have it just respond. Yeah, you know what, the list is fine. And console log out, so close, but I actually just want to see this. In fact, I just want to see the DB. Okay, and now let's hit this route. User, class user. So it really is there. I told you, I really did add it to the request object, but let's do this for real. Let's use destructuring. Class user equals recdb. Great. That looks much better. Now, when I hit that, you know, it's not going to respond with anything because I haven't made any users yet. This was kind of operating like a seed file, which I'm fine to mimic that essentially. So now let's just do user.create John and Jane and Bob, and I get, you know what, that's all AI wants to give us. So const seed equals do this. And I'll call it. Okay, now, there we go. 1, 2, 3, just like we did before. And this has the benefit too, we will talk about this when we get into our database land, but now I'm essentially seeding the database. I am starting out with some users every time my app restarts, so I don't constantly have to create users manually with the post route. I am seeding my database. I am planting users that just already exist. This is really helpful when you're developing so that you don't have to constantly keep, you know, manually going through the request routes to post and post and post and post. This is something that we will talk more about, but this concept of seeding is very useful in development. Okay, so this is good. So I now have my in-memory database, but it's locked away behind model. I can't get to it unless I go through the model. That is exactly what I want. So let's just keep going. Sorry, let me close that. I always leave that open. Let me just close that. So now we have a little more room to see. And let's get this one. So the next one is users ID. So this is our REST show route, if you guys remember REST. So this was our REST index route that just listed all the users. Now let's do the REST show route that gets a single one. So here, I don't want that. I'm going to copy this up here. And I'm going to say user.find ID. And I'm going to cast that as a number. Okay, now let's see if that worked. Name John. Okay, that's good. And let's make sure that this still works if there isn't a user, right? So let's see let's just check. Let's see what our user actually does. So find tries to find a user in its internal database, which is again just a private all variable like you guys are used to. And if it can't find one, it explicitly says null. So ordinarily, if you can't find anything with find, it returns undefined. This is explicitly saying, hey, return null. So that's cool. That makes testing a little easier. So if there is no user, there should be a null here, and then we would send a 404. Let's just make sure that still works. Over here, not found. Great. What we're doing here is we're refactoring and constantly checking that the functionality stayed the same even though we changed things. So, okay, now this is nice. Okay, this is a big old chunk of logic that we don't need anymore. And instead, let's do const user equals recdb. And if there's no name, leave the 400. Great, that's cool. And new user is here. So now when I post the users, there we go. Let's see, that looks good. Listen all the users, that looks good. There she is. Okay, great. So we are really cooking. Now, I've done this a few times here, and I just want to take a brief second that this is totally fine, and some people prefer this, but you'll notice here that both of these objects are the request object. So you can actually destructure this all in one statement. And the way that you do that is you go back down to the one that actually matches. So both of these things have a request. And I'll put in here, I'll go body name. Now this is destructuring more than one level. And now I can say db user. Now I don't need that line. And let's just keep me honest here. Let's try and post. Woohoo! And she's still at 4 because remember, I'm restarting my server and losing all but my 3 seed files here. Seed users here. But this seems to still work. I was still able to create an itself, and that is real neato. So you can see that this is, maybe some people don't like this because it's not super readable. I don't mind it. I kind of like it, but you can also break it out over here so that it's still one statement and you just, go break it out through here. Truly, if you have something that's like 4 layers deep, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but this is just something that you might see out there, so I want you to be aware of it. And we're still well before our 80 line maximum. So I honestly I prefer this. I think this is nice for a setup like this. Anyway, let's keep going. So now that was our post, and now let's do our patch. So user ID, this is our update route. Let's put it in here. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. So now const params goes to ID. Body goes to name. And then now I have the new one, db goes to user. And here I do have 3 things. So let's actually break that out into our separate ideas. Like this. It's yelling at me because there's 2 names. Don't worry, this is not a syntax problem. Like that. Okay, cool. So now it's like, hey, everything coming from the request. You got the params, the body, and the db. It's all coming from here. And now let's update this. So now this is an interesting one, okay? So let's look and see how we have this. I do have an update method, and it takes in the user name that I want to update and the ID. If it can't find a user, it returns null. And if it does find a user, it updates the name and then returns the user. That is interesting. So now, instead of having my first check for the 404 here and then the update down here, I can do something like this. So user.update through that, and I take this out. Oh, I like the space. And this does exactly the same thing, because if this update does not find a user, it will be null, and that means this will run and we get a 404. Otherwise, just send the user. You don't have to run the actual update in a separate step. So that's nice. Our handler just got a little bit simpler. This is, again, unchanged because this name doesn't have really anything to do with my user object. That's a payload from the front end. So if the payload is goofed, don't even bother with this. So that just stays the same. And again, the layers go both ways. So the model talks to the database, but the model does not talk to the HTTP. The controller does the actual talking there. And it knows things like res.send status, and my user has no idea. All it does is return things from the database or null or something. It doesn't have a concept of a server or a status code. You have to take what it returns and do something with it here. See, like, don't put this inside the model. Keep res.send status in the controller, but use what the model returns. So here it's either returning an object or it's returning null. That's totally fine. But keep the HTTP stuff and the business logic in the actual controller. Okay? All right, and last one here. Let's do it. Oh, did I actually update it? No, I didn't run the update. Let's just make sure. Let's just make sure this works. So that will create one, and this is our update. So let's update the first one. Now that we have, and it's let's call this something else. Save that. Send. Now the ID should be 1, and it is. And if I say user 100, it should still return a 404. Great. And if I just take this out completely, it should still return a 400. And you know that it does. Nice. Let me put that down. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, and then last but not least, finally, is delete. So this, again, like this is a lot of internal logic that I just do not want to deal with that. So let's instead go and update it with our user. So let's take out all of the, well, here, let's leave that actually. And take that out. So let's just look really quickly at what our destroy actually does. So it looks like if it finds a user to delete and it does not, if it does not find a user to delete, it returns false. And if it does delete the user successfully, it returns true. So the user index, I don't need that anymore. Instead, I can use a Boolean, const did delete. Oh, and you know what? My bad. I gotta destructure this first. So params. And then DB. And don't forget to remove this. You have to remove that one at the end. You just want the request because I'm destructuring the params here. Okay, so I don't want that. All right, so I now have user.destroy, number ID, cool. So now, none of this, but if it did not delete, then do the 404, otherwise do the 204. So now look how much simpler this controller is. There's a saying that's not super, I don't really like it. It's fat model, skinny controller. Let's just say big model, small controller, where the idea is that you have relatively simple controllers that are just the business logic for your app. They just handle talking to different services. And the actual model itself is where the database complexity, where the actual entity complexity lives. And I think that's a nice pattern because it, in general, keeps things sort of spread out. You don't have any of these massive classes because everybody's only talking to their single domain. You know, you only have model concerns, you only have HTTP concerns. So I like this. This is now a much cleaner thing. In fact, I guess you could technically scoot this in here and do it like that. But I don't really want to. I think this is fine. It's very readable. If I deleted it, then, you know, go through like this. All right. So that now is all of our stuff running on the new model. I'm just going to single line this for now. All of our stuff running on the new model through the middleware. So with that, our application is now in a place that is ready to be chopped up. And I'm really excited for that. So let's keep trucking. Okay, so I think the first thing to break out, and honestly, frankly, the easiest thing to break out would be our middleware. Now, I'm not talking about all middleware, like, you know, I don't really, this is fine. I'm talking about the middleware that we ourselves wrote. So right now, that's just the logger middleware and the adding in the model middleware. So let's go over here and make a folder called middleware. Let's add in here, add logging.js, and let's add in here, add models. Okay, cool. So now let's, whoa, don't go over there. Let's close that. Let's now add, so this is our logging middleware. Copy that and put it in here. Now, this is going to be the only thing in this file. I think that is a way to keep things organized. I just want to have this one function here. And so that means I can use a default export. And I could do this, I could just directly do that, or I could have it down here and say add logging and then const add logging, like that. Same exact thing. This is purely a style preference and I don't care which one you do. So I'm gonna do it like this for this one, and I'm going to do it like, like this for the other one. So let's get that, copy here, go to add models. So module.exports equals this. Okay, cool. Same idea there. Okay, now for this one though, I have to actually remember to import const user. Yeah, there you go. You got it. You got it. All right, so here we go. That. Now, let's update this. So instead of saying this inline, let's do add models. Okay, and let's get this. Whoa, stop that, you. Let's get this one out and do. It really wants me to add that, but I'm not doing it. Add logging, just like that. Okay, great. And now I just changed a couple things, so let's make sure our app still works, right? Whenever you're refactoring, testing is essential. Testing quickly, testing everything that you just changed. I don't have a test suite for this, so essentially what I'm doing is more QA. But yeah, okay, that still works, and I still get my logs, and that's got a 404 not found. That's good, and it still logs it out. Let's make a new one. Okay, post users, and there we go. Okay, yeah, I mean, I would say that that's still correctly adding the models. So now let's close those because they're good. Let's close this guy because we don't need it. So now this is a lot clearer. And actually, here, let's just, you know, now that you guys know what this is. Okay, and there we go. There we go. Good. And this is really nice because now all my middleware is in a single place, and it's really easy if I wanted to change the order of things or move things around. You know exactly what's going on, and I have nice named functions, so it's like, oh, what's this middleware doing? It's adding the logging. What's this one doing? It's adding the models. So that's really cool. Now I have basically changed the structure, but the file itself became more readable, and if I ever need to go into one of these, it's super easy. In VS Code, you just command click, and it takes you to the actual file, and everything is working there. We're going to leave these here, and we'll address them later on. But for now, I think we're all set with moving the middleware. All right, so the next thing, I like that I got my middleware out of here. The next thing I'm going to want to do is get all of my routes. But look over here in my side view. There's a lot going on here. Everything is at the top level. And that's not necessarily something that I really want to be the case. So what you will see a lot of times is a source folder, and everything inside your source folder is what you need for the application to run. And it tends to be that the things outside of the source folder are, you know, config files, maybe an entry point. But for us, let's start to use this source that we can keep some of this complexity contained. So let's move my index in there. And a bunch of stuff is going to break. That's fine. Let's move public in there. Sorry, I didn't mean to add public in here. Let's leave that outside of source. That is just the convention way of doing it. But this is better, right? So now I have my models and stuff. My app, my things live in here. Public and no modules live outside of here because that's just the way it is. But let's now fix things. So it's not index, it's source index. So yeah, that'll maybe shut that up. Okay, cool. So now I'm running. Let's see if VS Code got everything transferred over. Looks like it did. Okay, yeah, you can't find it. Let's make a new one. Let's check that it exists. Let's update. Okay, cool. Very important when you scoot things around to make sure that it still works. So now I have a source directory, and it keeps my app looking a little cleaner. So I think that's really nice. Back to our, you know, prime motivation here. I want to get all of these routes out of here because this file index.js currently is doing too much. So I want to remove the burden of defining my routes. So let's make a routes.js. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy, everything out like that and stick it in here. Now, this is where something kind of cool with Express comes in. So I have all my routes in here, but obviously this isn't going to work because I'm referencing app, but how am I getting app in here? Now I could build a function or something that takes in an app and adds all these routes to it, but there's actually a slightly nicer way that Express gives us. So const express equals require express const router equals express.router. And what this router is think of it like a mini app. You know, it does it does most of what app does, but it lets us make like smaller segments. Some people go really crazy with routers. They have a router for every resource, so you have users and blogs and comments. We're not going to get that crazy. I'm just going to use a router in here to define all of my routes. And all you have to do, watch this, super simple. Take all your app and turn it into router, and then just export the router. That's it. That's all you got to do. So now this file is good for now. And then let's go back to our index and import it, const API route. I like to say, you can say router. I like to say routes because that's what it actually is. Now it's yelling at me. It's freaking out because doing all this stuff. But down here, app.listen, let's do, oh, sorry. Yeah, we're gonna keep it. No, let's app.use API routes. Okay. Oh, why are you still yelling at me? Oh, because that's wrong. Because it's just routes, no API. There we go. But what it's doing here is this is really cool. What this will let me do, if I just plug it in like this, everything works exactly the same. All it's going to use is take all my routes and use them like a piece of middleware. But what's neat and why people like this is because if I do this /API/v1, now suddenly every single one of these is behind a new route /API/v1/users. Watch, see, it still works. And people really like that because now if you have multiple versions of your API, you can very easily do that. You can namespace all of your API routes so it's different from all of your front-end routes. It's really cool. And you can, by the way, you can take this out and just put it in here so I could copy, you know, API v1. Some people do that, and the reason why they like, I think honestly, if I'm really being honest, I like that sometimes because when you're going through and, you know, you're on /users or something, you can just copy the whole thing. It would be API v1. You can just, you know, you don't have to stop right before the v1. You can just copy the whole thing. But whatever. We are going to keep it like we had it and namespace it. So this is something that you'll see, and it's really handy. And again, now look, I mean, now look how clean our index file is. You know, it does all these things independently, but it looks really nice. You have a super clean index file. But the problem here is that basically I took all that ugly complexity from one file and then just copied it wholesale into another file. So now I have a big ugly file over here. And that's not really what I want either. I want to keep this clean. So what should routes do? Well, routes should take a function and match it to a route. It should take many functions and many routes. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's take all of these callbacks, let's take them and put them into their own files. Now let's set this up. So, sorry, source, I'm gonna have controllers for all of my controllers. So how would we break this up? Well, right now, again, we're keeping it simple. All I have is a user controller, but soon you'll have a user controller, a blog controller, a comment controller, all sorts of things for each different, you know, base route here. So /users, /comments, let's put those in individually. So let's say user controller like this. Now VS Code is going to make this look weird, and that's really annoying. So just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to add a non-existent comment controller. Just so there's something, oh jeez, just so there's something else for you to see and it doesn't look weird. See, now it's nice. Now I have this, but we're just going to ignore this. You know what? Ignore. I don't care about your file. I just want VS Code to do it. I am sure there's a preference way to switch that. I just don't know. I've never bothered because honestly, I've never had a project with only a single thing in here. There's always stuff. Anyway, so now I want to copy these out all into their own unique files. How should I name them? Well, let's stick with REST. So this delete, let's take this out. This is the destroy route. So I'll do user controller and I'll do destroy.js. Copy it in here. And again, same exact idea. You can either do module.exports directly or you can, you know, call it controller and then just export that. Const controller, no, controller equals this module.exports control, right? You can do either way. It doesn't really matter. I think since I'm going to be doing this a bunch, let's just stick with module.exports right here. Okay, cool. So now I do that. Now I'm going to do this for all of the rest of them. So just give me a second. Okay, so here I have all of my routes transferred over, and they're just named. So this is the show route from rest show. I show a single one. This is the update. I update a single one. I destroy a single one. I create a single one. But then there's this show all. The rest name for this is index. But I didn't call this index.js because that is a magic file in JavaScript. See, if you require something, a local file, so const user controller equals require, it's not a real thing, a user controller, doing this automatically does this, index. If you just try to import a folder and you don't specify a file, before Node throws an error and says like, hey, I can't find what you're talking about, it will automatically look for an index.js. And if it finds it, it will then carry on just as normal. It's like, oh, you meant the index file. Great, that's exactly what you were looking for. So we can take advantage of that to make what's called a barrel file. And a barrel file just imports a bunch of things and then exports them, sometimes with different names, but as a single object. So let's show you what I mean really quick. Okay, there we go. So now I have imported all of these different files over here, and I just immediately export them again. And this seems odd, and I'll give you, this is honestly, not everybody likes barrel files. They don't love them. But the reason why I want to do this is because now I have a super clean API for all of these. So all I have to do up here is say const user controller, require controllers user controller, and I can do this. I have everything that I need right here, and now all routes does is take the controller methods and link them to the routes. So hey, when you go here, give this. When you go here with this verb, give this one. When you go here, and this just keeps my file a whole lot cleaner. There are still going to, you have to somewhere import and export everything individually from their files. But in terms of like what your developing experience is, I think it's a little nicer to read. And we're definitely getting into the realm of opinion, because you certainly could ignore the index. So you could ignore the index file barrel over here and just have your methods and then import them all. Const, user create equals, and then go through there and just have all of those imports here. But what I'm saying is that this file is going to be adding probably 3 or 4 different controllers or more, and you don't want to have all those imports in here. There are obviously other ways to do it, but I think this is kind of nice. The one trick is whenever you create a new file in here, make sure you include it in the barrel file so that it can actually be imported in your routes. But this is kind of it. It keeps everything nice and clear in terms of the way our app is constructed. There's just one last piece, and that's this guy. So in here, we're doing some stuff. We're building our app, and that's great, but actually we're doing 2 main things. We are building our app and we are starting our app. And that's not great, because now when it comes to testing, I'm in a little bit of a pickle. If I want to test my server, there's no way that I can just grab the server. I'm going to have to actually start the server and make real HTTP requests. And that's, maybe you don't have any frame of reference for it, that's fine. But that's not great, because all those HTTP requests will add up over time, and they add a whole layer of complexity there. What modern tests will allow us to do is if I just hand them a non-started app, they can go in and fake the HTTP requests a lot faster. They can fake the network level to make sure that all of the mechanical stuff works. So that's what I want, and that's what we're going to have to do. So let's, instead of having just an index, let's make a server file too, server.js, and go in here. I'll just copy the whole thing. paste it here. So now all I need inside server are the stuff for app. So I don't need the port, I don't need the seeds, and I don't need the listen. What I do need to do is module.exports app. So I can export the app. I think I got everything. Yep, no longer need that. And over here, this is about to get a lot simpler. Let's take rid of that. Well, actually, let's keep just the app and say require server. Okay. Get rid of all of this. I need the port. And since I'm starting here, that's fine. I will keep the seeds when I start my server, because for my tests, I will do the seeds individually on only what I need. I don't know that I need these 3 users. And let's clean all of that up. I don't need express in here. I don't need path. And cool. So now this is my index file and this is my server file. And again, I just changed a bunch of stuff. So let's make sure everything still works. That looks good. Let's get the user 1. Let's get a user that doesn't exist. Let's update the first user to be Zoe. Let's check again that it is. Okay, that's great. Good. Looks like everything's still working. So now I truly have all of the pieces together. I have everything working in such a way where everything has its own place and there's a place for everything. All my controllers look nice. All my routes are really easy to update. I know exactly where to go for any of these stuff. I can command click into them. And now my starting and creating logic are separated out. Let me close this so we can actually see things. It's separated out. So that's going to make testing a whole lot easier. I hope this helps, and you'll see this on your assignments. But if you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out and ask. But I think that this is good. So I will see you guys later.